Did you just hear that? Did you just sit there and actually listen to what that man said? Tony Grossi, a reporter who has been covering the Cleveland Browns since 1984, just stood at a microphone on ESPN 850 Cleveland and told the entire NFL world that Dillon Gabriel, a 5'11" third-round pick who went 1-5 as a starter last season, would make a better backup quarterback than Shedeur Sanders. Not a better starter, a better backup, as in the guy who holds the clipboard, the guy who hands out water cups, the guy who runs the scout team. Grossi is out here saying Dillon Gabriel is better suited for that role than a quarterback who threw for over 1,400 yards in 7 starts and still had the Cleveland crowd chanting his name while Gabriel was throwing incompletions. I'm Dre Fiver, this is Dre Reports, and today we are not playing around. Strap in, because what is happening in Cleveland right now is one of the most orchestrated quarterback burial jobs in NFL history, and the media is holding the shovel. Let me set the scene for those who are just tuning into this story, because you need all the context before we go any further. Going into the 2026 offseason, the Cleveland Browns had a quarterback situation that was genuinely one of the most fascinating in the entire NFL. Shedeur Sanders, the son of Hall of Famer Deion Sanders, fell all the way to the 5th round of the 2025 NFL Draft. A guy who completed 74% of his passes at Colorado with a 37-10 touchdown-to-interception ratio somehow slid out of the 1st round, out of the 2nd round, out of the 3rd round, out of the 4th round, and landed at pick 144. The Browns had already taken Oregon's Dillon Gabriel at pick 94, 50 picks earlier, before turning around and selecting Sanders 2 rounds later. 2 quarterbacks in 1 draft, back-to-back. Everybody had questions, and now, less than a year later, those questions have turned into a full-blown soap opera, with no signs of stopping. Because here is where we stand right now. Reports have been leaking out of Cleveland from multiple sources, suggesting that people inside the Browns organization want fans to understand that Deshaun Watson, the same one owner Jimmy Haslam called a swing and a miss back in April of 2025, is on track to be named the Week 1 starting quarterback for the 2026 season. Let that sink in for a second. The man who hasn't played a full healthy season since before some of these fans graduated high school. The man who is still working his way back from not 1 but 2 Achilles surgeries. The man the owner himself publicly buried in the press just 12 months ago. That man. They want to start that man. And the Cleveland media? They are dutifully carrying that water bucket by bucket every single day. And Grossi just picked up the biggest bucket in the building. Now, before we go any further, I need to give you the full picture of what ignited this entire firestorm, because it did not start with Tony Grossi. It started with Mary Kay Cabot. For those who don't know, Mary Kay Cabot is the veteran Browns insider for one of Cleveland's major newspapers. She has covered this franchise for over 30 years. She is a winner of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Bill Nunn Jr. Memorial Award, one of the highest honors in professional football writing. This is not some random blogger with a hot take account. This is a genuine institution of Cleveland sports journalism. And what she reported lit a match that burned the entire Sanders family camp to the ground. After voluntary minicamp wrapped up in late April, Cabot reported that Watson had emerged from the sessions with a clear edge over Shedeur Sanders. She went further on social media, writing that she believed the Browns should declare Watson their QB1 immediately and let the offense start to develop chemistry, stating that there was no time to waste. Now, reasonable people can agree or disagree with that opinion. That is totally fine. That is what reporters do. They form opinions based on what they observe, and they share them publicly. But what happened next? Shedeur's brother Shedeur Sanders decided the best response to a Hall of Fame-level journalist was to slide into the Instagram comments and tell her to, and I am quoting this verbatim, "Go make a sandwich." That is what he said. 5 words that somehow managed to be both embarrassing and historically short-sighted at the same time. Now look, I am going to be real with y'all the way Dre Reports always keeps it real. The "go make a sandwich" comment was wrong. Full stop. That was a misogynistic thing to say to a woman who has spent more than 3 decades building her career covering this sport at the highest level. You do not have to agree with her assessment of the quarterback competition, but you attack the argument, not the person's gender. Period. That was a bad look for the Sanders family, in a moment when they really could not afford even one more bad look. And instead of leaving it there, Shiloh went on his Twitch channel and doubled down, accusing Cabot of holding a personal agenda against his brother, and claiming her reporting was driven by emotion rather than fact. Here is the cold, hard truth about all of this that Shiloh is not seeing, and that nobody in the national media is saying clearly enough. A respected national football reporter directly connected the dots between the family's ongoing off-field behavior and Shedeur's catastrophic draft day fall, saying it seems like there is always something going on around Shedeur, that it is hard to blame Shedeur personally, but that this dynamic is part of why he slid in the draft in the first place. Think about what that means. Every Instagram comment, every Twitch rant, every piece of manufactured drama that swirls around this family gets deposited directly into the reasons teams are hesitant about this kid account, and that account balance is getting dangerously high. But let us back up even further and talk about the larger game being played here, because this is where it gets really deep. This is where Dre Reports separates itself from everybody else who is just reacting to surface-level drama. What is actually happening in Cleveland is a coordinated media narrative, and it runs all the way up through the Haslam family ownership. Think about who is at the center of all of this reporting. Mary Kay Cabot, Tony Grossi. These are the two most connected, most credentialed beat reporters covering the Cleveland Browns day in and day out. These are the people who get the calls from the front office. These are the people who get tipped off before anybody else. And the tip line runs directly to ownership and management. Now, I am not sitting here saying these reporters are making things up out of thin air. What I am saying is that in this league, sources always have agendas. When a team executive tips off a reporter, they are not doing it out of the goodness of their heart and their love for the game. They are doing it because it serves the organizational vision. And right now, the organizational vision in Cleveland, whether we like it or not, whether it makes football sense or not, appears to be Deshaun Watson as the starting quarterback to open 2026. An ESPN analyst put it plainly on Cleveland radio, saying he could not understand why the Browns would go through all the pomp and circumstance and distraction of drafting Shedeur Sanders if they clearly did not believe he was the guy. His point was direct. You would not even be having the Watson conversation if you genuinely believed Sanders had franchise quarterback potential. That is a fair point, and it is exactly the contradiction that should be making every Browns fan absolutely furious right now. You draft the most recognizable quarterback prospect in years, a guy whose father is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a guy the entire country watched fall through the entire draft, and you bring him in at fifth-round money with a fifth-round ceiling in the eyes of your own organization? For what? To sell some jerseys at training camp? To get some social media engagement during the preseason? Because if you genuinely truly believed in Shedeur Sanders as your future, Deshaun Watson's name would not be anywhere near this starting quarterback conversation. Now let's talk about what actually happened during Shedeur's rookie season, because the media loves to frame his story as a failure, and that framing is simply not honest. When the 2025 season opened, Sanders started his NFL career as the team's fourth-string quarterback, behind Joe Flacco, behind Dillon Gabriel, behind Kenny Pickett, who was eventually traded. Watson was placed on the physically unable to perform list. Sanders spent the entire training camp getting reps only with the second and third-string players. They did not give this kid anything. They did not give him first-team preparation. They did not give him a real, genuine shot to compete. He was buried from day one before the season even started. And then what happened? Gabriel started between Week 5 and Week 10, going 1-5 over 6 starts, completing under 60% of his passes for 937 yards, with 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That is mediocre at best. And Cleveland fans knew it. During the Week 11 game against the Ravens, the crowd at Huntington Bank Field broke out with chants of, "We want Shedeur," and booed after multiple errant passes from Gabriel. The paying customers, the ones who matter most, were telling the organization something loud and clear. And then the concussion happened, and Shedeur Sanders finally got his moment. Sanders made his NFL debut against the Baltimore Ravens in Week 11, coming on at halftime after Gabriel's concussion. He finished 4 of 16 passing for 47 yards with an interception and was sacked twice. He also contributed 16 yards on 3 carries as Cleveland lost 23-16. Now the media went absolutely crazy with those numbers. 4 for 16. He can't play. He was terrible. And I am not going to sugarcoat it. That completion percentage is not good. But let me ask you something very important before you accept that narrative. This man had been getting scout team reps all season long. He had not run a single meaningful play with the starting offense since the day he was drafted. According to the Browns' own head coach at the time, the Ravens game was literally the first time Sanders had played with the starting offense since falling to the 5th round. Even after being named the backup following the Joe Flacco trade, Sanders was still not getting first-team reps in practice. The coaching staff kept funneling those reps to Gabriel. So let me get this straight. You give a rookie quarterback 0 first-team practice reps across an entire NFL season. You throw him into a live game at halftime against the Baltimore Ravens with no advanced preparation whatsoever. And then you use his completion percentage in that situation as the evidence that he cannot play quarterback in this league? That is not an evaluation. That is a trap. That is setting a young man up for a specific outcome and then pointing to the outcome as proof of your predetermined conclusion. Any football person with a brain understands this. And yet, despite all of that, despite the zero preparation, despite the shock debut, despite the entire organization working against his development, Shedeur Sanders still found a way to grow into the role. He started 7 games for Cleveland by the end of the season. The final stat line of roughly 56% completions, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions is not Pro Bowl material. Nobody is claiming it is. But what matters is the context and the trajectory. The 2025 season ended with Sanders starting the final 7 games and winning 2 of them. Meanwhile, Watson remained sidelined after 412 days away from live football following his second Achilles surgery. Sanders had been out there competing, taking hits, learning the NFL game in real time. And now we are supposed to believe that Watson is suddenly the better option based on voluntary minicamp throwing drills in late April, with no live defense and no game speed? Now, let's talk about what Tony Grossi actually said, because I want every single person watching this video to fully understand what the implications of this take really are. Grossi went on ESPN 850 Cleveland and essentially argued that Shedeur Sanders is too famous, too polarizing, and too complicated to even function as a backup quarterback on an NFL roster. His exact framing was that Gabriel is the kind of guy who will keep quiet, study the game plan, support the starter, and run the scout team without causing any kind of circus. And then he said that Shedeur's shadow is simply too large. He even went as far as suggesting that this outside shadow is one of the primary reasons teams avoided Sanders throughout the entire draft. Because if you did not want him as your starter, you would not consider taking him as a backup given all the attention that comes with the Sanders name. Let me translate what Tony Grossi is actually saying here, because I want it to be crystal clear. He is saying that Shedeur Sanders' crime is being too famous. He is saying that having a large public profile, a Hall of Fame father, and a massive social media following disqualifies you from holding a backup quarterback role in the National Football League. He is saying that the quiet, unassuming guy who went 1-5 as a starter and got booed by his own home crowd is the safer, smarter organizational choice. That is what this argument amounts to when you remove all the football language and get down to the actual substance. He makes too much news, bench him. And here is what is truly wild about the whole thing. At the Browns' rookie minicamp last May, Grossi said Gabriel looked a little bit better over the course of the 2-day session, pointing to things like his tight spiral, his assertiveness, and what he perceived as better arm strength than expected. That was a rookie minicamp observation. No pads, no live contact, no full coverage schemes, limited competitive reps in a controlled environment. And yet that single observation was amplified into a narrative that has followed Shedeur Sanders like a shadow all the way into the 2026 offseason. Meanwhile, at that exact same minicamp, other respected voices in the media said Sanders looked like the best player on the field, and that it was not even close. A former NFL player said it. A respected national reporter from one of the top football publications in the country said it, and Cabot herself acknowledged that it was much closer to a tie than some were reporting, and that Sanders looked very good, and more than held his own. But you do not hear about those takes in the Watson is starting narrative, do you? No, you only hear Grossi. This is exactly how media selection works in the NFL. When a narrative has been decided internally, reporters reach for the quotes and observations that support it and quietly ignore the ones that don't. The narrative in Cleveland right now is that Watson starts, Shedeur holds the clipboard or goes home, and Tony Grossi is providing the intellectual scaffolding for that narrative by dressing it up in legitimate football analysis language. It sounds credible because Grossi is credible. But credible people can still be used as instruments of an organizational agenda without even realizing it is happening. And now, under new head coach Todd Monkin, the machinery is only accelerating. On the very first day of Monkin's voluntary minicamp sessions, Sanders did take the first snaps in 11-on-11 drills. But over 5 total team periods, Watson was first up 3 times and Sanders only twice. Dillon Gabriel barely got meaningful reps for the first couple of sessions, entering only after Watson had already gotten a second set in the rotation. And when Monkin was asked why he loaded up with 5 team periods in a single practice session, his answer was 3 words: because we're allowed. That is the energy of a head coach who has a plan locked in and is not particularly interested in explaining himself to anybody on the outside. Now here is where I will give Todd Monkin some genuine credit. And Dre Reports always gives credit where credit is due. At least the man is being more transparent about the nature of this competition than Kevin Stefanski ever was a year ago. Monkin has said openly that the quarterback decision will be based entirely on performance, not on draft position, not on name recognition, and not on what it means for the franchise's future draft positioning. According to national reporting, Watson and Sanders are the clear leaders in this competition at this point in the offseason, with Gabriel a distant third. But Monkin himself has cautioned that the Browns are focused primarily on teaching and installing a brand new offensive system right now, rather than making lasting evaluative conclusions in May. That nuance matters enormously. The media is out here calling the race before the horses have even left the starting gate. Watson gets one decent voluntary minicamp in a brand new offensive system with no live contact, and suddenly, it is Watson has the inside track and Shedeur is falling behind Gabriel, and the entire Cleveland media apparatus is lined up like a choir to tell you that the future of this franchise is a 30-year-old quarterback coming off a second Achilles surgery and over 400 days away from live NFL football. Do you believe that? Do you genuinely, in your football-watching heart, believe that? Here is my personal take, and I will give it to you completely straight, because that is what this channel is built on. Jimmy Haslam made one of the most expensive quarterback mistakes in the history of professional football when he signed Deshaun Watson to that fully guaranteed contract. He paid that man like a generational franchise cornerstone and got almost nothing functional in return. The reputational damage, the financial cost, the draft capital sacrificed. It was a historic organizational catastrophe by any measure. And rather than fully committing to the rebuild, letting the young quarterback room compete openly, and allowing Shedeur Sanders to develop into whatever he is ultimately going to become, the ownership group appears to be in the final stages of one last face-saving exercise. Starting Watson one more time lets Haslam say to the fan base and to the league, "We gave him every single opportunity under a new coaching staff with a fresh system." It lets them point to a training camp competition if Watson eventually fails again. And it kicks the hardest question in Browns history. Was the Watson contract the single worst decision in modern NFL history? Down the road for one more season? Shedeur Sanders is the inconvenient truth sitting right in the middle of all of this. Because if Shedeur Sanders starts and plays well, and given proper preparation and first-team reps I genuinely believe he will, then every single decision the Cleveland Browns organization made over the last 3 years looks even more catastrophically wrong by comparison. Drafting Gabriel 50 picks ahead of him looks worse. Starting Joe Flacco over him looks worse. Spending the season burying him on the depth chart looks worse. Running Watson out there one more time looks historically bad. The only way to protect the organizational legacy, and more importantly, to protect the people who made these decisions from having to answer for them, is to make absolutely sure that Watson gets one more legitimate shot while Shedeur holds the clipboard. And Tony Grossi just handed them the perfectly packaged language to justify it publicly. Now let me bring this all the way home. Haslam publicly called Watson a swing and a miss 12 months ago. Then, when Monkin's minicamp started, Haslam was talking about a fresh start and praising the new coach's ability to develop all kinds of quarterbacks. That is a complete 180-degree reversal in one calendar year. And ask yourself honestly, what actually changed? Did Watson get dramatically, demonstrably better? He is still rehabbing. He is still installing a brand new offensive system. He is still on the wrong side of 30 years old, coming off back-to-back catastrophic injury seasons. What changed is not Watson. What changed is the narrative being manufactured and distributed by the organization, and the Cleveland media is serving it right back, warm and fresh, every single morning. The preseason games are coming, and I want you to lock in what I am telling you right now, because I am going to hold this take completely accountable when August arrives and those games kick off. If Shedeur Sanders goes out there in preseason and does what I believe he is capable of doing with real preparation and a real opportunity, watch what happens with the media coverage. Watch how many Watson looks sharp in limited work stories appear, even if Watson looks ordinary. Watch how many Sanders has a lot to learn about the new system qualifiers get carefully inserted into every single positive Shedeur observation. Watch the language evolve and shift in real time right in front of your eyes. Because these reporters need their media credentials. They need their locker room access, they need their relationships with the front office to stay warm. And you do not maintain any of that in this league by consistently going against the ownership vision in print and on the air. I am not calling them liars. I am saying they operate within a system that rewards alignment with power and punishes consistent dissent. And in that system, Shedeur Sanders does not win the starting job on talent alone. He wins it only if the evidence becomes so overwhelming that the organization can no longer justify the alternative. We are not there yet, but the preseason will tell us everything, because here is the absolute bottom line that nobody in the city of Cleveland wants to say out loud. Shedeur Sanders, given proper preparation, consistent first-team reps, and a genuine open competition, gives the Cleveland Browns a better chance to win meaningful football games in 2026 than Deshaun Watson does. Not because Watson was never a great quarterback. He absolutely was. Not because Watson doesn't deserve respect for everything he survived, but because the human body has real limits. Recovery timelines from multiple Achilles injuries are brutally unforgiving, and the quarterback who spent last season taking real NFL hits and growing in real time is not the one with 400 days off. The Browns know this. The front office knows this. Todd Monkin almost certainly knows this. And the media, they know it too. But knowing something and saying it are very different things when your entire professional infrastructure depends on staying in the good graces of the people who hold the keys. Watch the preseason, trust the tape, question the narrative. I'm Dre Fiver, and this has been Dre Reports. If this video showed you something the rest of the sports media world is deliberately choosing not to show you, smash that like button right now. It costs you absolutely nothing.
Hey everyone, we are working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
And it puts this information in front of more people who need to see it. Drop your take in the comments right now. Do you believe the Cleveland Browns are going to start Deshaun Watson over Shedeur Sanders this season? And if they do, what does that decision say about how this organization actually values its own future? Subscribe to Dre Reports for the unfiltered, no agenda, no access protecting sports coverage that the mainstream media simply cannot give you. We are not here to protect anyone's press credentials or anyone's relationship with ownership. We are here to tell you the truth, even when the truth makes powerful people uncomfortable. That is what Dre Reports does. Every single time.